Welcome back to Investing Talk podcast. Sometimes a stock's price action just screams, pay attention. That's exactly what we're doing today with Verve Therapeutics,
Yeah.
ticker symbol VERV.
I think it's safe to say Verve has been on a wild ride. Down about 70% from its peak, but then suddenly jumps nearly 19% in a single day.
Oh, wow.
That kind of volatility
Yeah.
definitely grabs investors' attention.
Exactly. So for anyone who's not already glued to Verve's every move, let's break down why it's suddenly back in the spotlight. They're working on some seriously cutting-edge stuff, right? Gene editing to fight heart disease.
That's right. Verve is using CRISPR technology, which essentially acts like molecular scissors, allowing them to precisely edit specific genes.
Like what?
Their focus is on permanently turning off a protein called PCSK9, which plays a major role in regulating cholesterol levels.
Okay, so I'm remembering all those commercials for cholesterol drugs. PCSK9 isn't exactly a brand new concept, is it?
You're right, PCSK9 has been a target for quite a while. We already have antibody drugs that block it,
Right.
but those require ongoing treatment. What Verve is aiming for is a one-time gene edit that permanently lowers cholesterol and, by extension, reduces the risk of heart disease.
So that's the game changer. A potential cure, not just management. No wonder people are excited. But didn't they have a setback with an earlier therapy, VERVE 101?
They did. VRVE 101 was placed on clinical hold due to safety concerns, specifically some patients experiencing elevated liver enzymes. It was a definite blow. But Verve learned a lot from that experience and used those insights to develop their next-generation therapy, VERVE 102.
And VERVE 102 is what everyone's watching now, right? It's in phase 1B trials. And I bet that big stock jump we talked about happened because they announced they were dosing patients.
You nailed it. The market is clearly anticipating positive data from the VERVE 102 trial.
Okay.
There's a lot of buzz around the improvements they've made, particularly with the delivery system.
Hold on, they're using something called GalNAc, right? I remember seeing that, but what exactly does it do?
GalNAc helps deliver the gene editing tool specifically to the liver cells, which is where PCSK9 is primarily produced.
Okay.
This targeted approach is expected to make the therapy more effective and potentially reduce the risk of off-target effects.
Okay, that makes sense. So all eyes are on this trial, but when can we expect to actually see some results? I know biotech timelines can feel like forever.
The anticipation is definitely building. Verve has said they expect initial data from the Heart-2 trial in the second quarter of 2025. That's going to be a major catalyst for the stock one way or the other.
No pressure, Verve. Okay, let's switch gears for a minute and talk about their financials. Their Q3 2024 earnings report actually looked pretty decent, didn't it?
It did. They reported $6.87 million in revenue, which is a 120% increase year over year.
Wow.
They also beat earnings estimates.
But let's be real here that revenue isn't from product sales, right? They don't actually have a product on the market yet.
That's right. The revenue is coming from collaboration deals. However, what's encouraging is that their losses are narrowing and they have a healthy cash position to continue funding their research and development.
How much cash are we talking about? Because developing these gene editing therapies is not cheap.
As of September 2024, they had $540 million in cash on hand, which gives them a runway of about 3.3 years based on their current spending. So they're in a pretty good position to keep moving forward.
3 years is a decent runway, especially in the world of biotech. So given all of this, what's the general sentiment from analysts about Verve?
There's a definite buzz. You're seeing firms like Stifel giving them a buy rating. And H.C. Wainwright has even set a price target of $14.
Wow.
Some analysts see Verve as one of the top CRISPR stocks to watch in 2025.
Wow, $14 is quite a jump from where the stock is trading right now. And it's not just the analysts who are bullish. I read that some big institutional investors have been buying up shares.
You're right. State Street Corporation bought a significant chunk of shares in Q3 2024. That's a pretty strong signal that some major players are seeing value in Verve. But, and this is a big bet.
Okay, I knew there had to be a but coming. What's the catch?
The catch is that Verve is still a very speculative play. It's high risk, high reward. If VERVE 102 is successful in trials, the stock could really take off. But if it fails, well, let's just say there's a lot of downside potential too.
So it sounds like buckle up buttercup territory for investors.
Yeah.
Let's switch gears one more time and talk about the technical picture. I know you're a bit of a chart guru. So what are the technical indicators telling us about Verve?
Technically, things are starting to look more interesting. VERV recently broke above both its 50-day and 200-day moving averages on pretty strong volume. That could be a sign that the long downtrend is starting to reverse.
Ooh, a potential reversal.
Yeah.
So are we talking about a bull run here?
It's too early to say for sure, but there are definitely some bullish signals. However, there's a resistance level between $7.80 and $8 that VERVE needs to break through convincingly.
Uh-huh.
If they can do that, things could get very interesting.
Got it. So a lot hinges on breaking through that ceiling. What's your overall take on Verve as an investment right now? High risk, high reward, but what else should our listeners be thinking about?
Verve is a fascinating company with a potentially game-changing technology. They're tackling a huge problem, cardiovascular disease, with a very innovative approach. But like any biotech company in the clinical trial stage, there's inherent risk.
I think that's a great place to wrap up part one of our look at Verve Therapeutics. You've given us a lot to digest, from the science behind their gene editing technology to the potential risks and rewards for investors.
And we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore when it comes to gene editing and its potential impact on the future of healthcare.
Exactly. So stay tuned for part two of our Investing Talk podcast, where we'll dive deeper into the broader implications of this revolutionary technology.
You know, when we talk about gene editing, it's easy to get caught up in the stock prices and the excitement of potential breakthroughs, but we need to remember this is about something truly revolutionary.
I'm all ears. What are you thinking about?
Well, imagine a world where we can cure diseases
Sure.
that have plagued humanity for centuries. Not just manage symptoms, but actually correct the underlying genetic cause. Gene editing has that kind of transformative potential.
Okay, that does sound pretty sci-fi, but isn't gene editing still a relatively new field? What kind of challenges are we looking at? And what about the ethical side of things?
You're hitting on some key points. The technology is evolving rapidly, but like any powerful tool, it comes with potential risks. One concern is off-target edits, where the CRISPR system accidentally modifies the wrong genes.
Yikes, so it's like a molecular scalpel
Yeah.
that slips and cuts something it shouldn't have.
That's a good analogy. That's why safety is a top priority in gene editing research. Scientists are constantly working to improve the precision and control of CRISPR technology.
That makes sense. So what about these ethical considerations? What are people worried about?
One of the biggest ethical questions revolves around something called germline editing. It means making genetic changes that could be passed down to future generations.
Okay, that definitely opens up a whole can of worms. You start thinking about designer babies and unintended consequences down the road. It sounds like we need some serious regulations around gene editing.
Absolutely. There are ongoing discussions among scientists, ethicists, and policymakers about how to responsibly develop and use this technology. It's a complex conversation, but a necessary one.
It really makes you wonder, are we on the cusp of a medical revolution, or is this all just hype? What's your take?
I believe we're witnessing the beginning of a new era in medicine. The potential of gene editing is simply too vast to ignore, but it's important to be realistic. It's not a magic bullet, and there are still hurdles to overcome.
So what are some of the things holding gene editing therapies back?
One of the biggest challenges is delivery. Getting the gene editing tools to the right cells in the body safely and efficiently. And then there's the cost factor.
Ah, yes, the cost. These therapies are probably going to be incredibly expensive, right? Not exactly something your average person can afford.
Initially, yeah, and they will likely be very expensive. But as the technology matures and economies of scale come into play, we can expect costs to come down.
So there's hope for the future, but I'm curious, beyond heart disease, what are some other areas where gene editing is showing promise?
The possibilities are almost endless. Researchers are exploring gene editing as a potential treatment for cancer genetic disorders, infectious diseases like HIV, and so much more. We're just scratching the surface of what this technology might be capable of.
Wow, that's incredible. It sounds like gene editing could really impact so many different aspects of healthcare. But let's bring it back to Verve Therapeutics for a minute. We've talked a lot about the science and the potential of gene editing, but what about the investment implications for our listeners?
That's a great question. As with any investment, it's crucial to do your research and understand the risks. Biotech investing, especially in companies like Verve that are still in clinical trials, can be very volatile.
So high risk, high reward. What are some key things our listeners should consider when evaluating a company like Verve?
First and foremost, look at the science. Does the company have a strong scientific foundation? Do they have an experienced management team? Then dive into their pipeline. What stage of development are their therapies in? What are the potential catalysts, and what are the risks?
And of course, financials are always important. Do they have enough cash to fund their research and development?
Absolutely. A company's financial health is critical, especially in biotech. Bringing a new drug to market can take years and billions of dollars. You want to make sure the company has the resources to see their vision through.
It sounds like investing in gene editing companies requires a certain level of risk tolerance and a long-term perspective.
I would agree with that assessment. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme. But for investors who are willing to do their homework and ride out the inevitable volatility, there's the potential for significant returns.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground in this part, from the potential of gene editing to cure diseases to the very real challenges and risks involved. And we've talked about what investors need to consider when evaluating a company like Verve. But where do we go from here? What's the next piece of the puzzle? Welcome back to Investing Talk Podcast. We've been exploring the exciting world of gene editing with Verve Therapeutics. But as we've hinted, Verve is just one piece of a much larger story unfolding in the biotech industry.
It's like gene editing is the first domino to fall. We're seeing a cascade of innovation happening in areas like cell therapy, artificial intelligence, and personalized medicine. It's a convergence of technologies that's completely changing how we approach healthcare.
So it's not just about individual breakthroughs anymore, but about how these different technologies are starting to work together.
Exactly. Think of it as a symphony of innovation. We're using AI to analyze massive amounts of genetic data, which helps researchers identify new drug targets and personalized treatments.
So are you saying we're moving away from a one-size-fits-all approach to medicine and toward treatments tailored to each person's unique genetic makeup?
That's the goal. We're talking about shifting from reactive care to proactive prevention, from simply treating diseases to potentially curing them.
That sounds incredible, almost like something out of science fiction. But how realistic is this vision? When can we expect to see these advancements become widely available?
It's already happening. We're seeing the first wave of gene therapies and personalized medicines hitting the market. The pace of innovation is only accelerating, so I believe the next 10 years will be transformative for healthcare.
Okay, so there's a lot to be excited about. But what about the challenges? It seems like there are still some big hurdles to overcome before this vision becomes a reality for everyone.
Absolutely. One of the biggest challenges is regulatory approval. These new technologies are complex, and it takes time for regulatory agencies to establish clear guidelines and ensure safety and efficacy.
And then there's the issue of cost.
Right.
These cutting-edge therapies are going to be expensive, at least at first. Not everyone will be able to afford them.
That's a real concern. The high cost of these treatments could create inequalities in access and affordability.
Right.
It's going to require a combined effort from governments, healthcare providers, and the biotech industry to address these challenges and make these innovations accessible to everyone.
It sounds like we need a global conversation about how to make these groundbreaking treatments available to all, not just a select few.
I agree. It's a discussion that needs to happen sooner rather than later.
So with all of these advancements and challenges in mind, what does this mean for investors? What should people be paying attention to in this rapidly evolving biotech landscape?
It's an incredibly exciting time to be investing in biotech. But it's also more important than ever to be smart and informed, look beyond the hype, and find companies with strong scientific foundations, solid pipelines, and experienced leadership teams.
Are there any specific areas within biotech that you're particularly excited about right now?
I'm personally fascinated by the intersection of gene editing and immunotherapy.
Oh.
We're seeing incredible progress using gene editing to supercharge the body's own immune system to fight cancer.
So we're essentially giving the immune system the tools it needs to target and destroy cancer cells more effectively.
Precisely. And the potential applications extend beyond cancer. We might be able to use this approach to target other diseases, too.
It feels like we're on the brink of a whole new era of medical innovation.
I agree. Companies like Verve Therapeutics are leading the charge, pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
This has been an amazing conversation. We've covered so much ground, from the specifics of Verve Therapeutics to the broader trends shaping the future of healthcare.
It's incredible to think how much progress is being made in gene editing and related fields. There's so much potential to improve human health in ways we never thought possible before.
Absolutely. It's a truly exciting time to be following this space. And for our listeners who want to learn even more, be sure to check out the show notes for links and additional resources.
And don't forget to subscribe to Investing Talk Podcast so you don't miss our future deep dives into innovative companies and groundbreaking technologies. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please share with your friends and leave us a comment. We love hearing from our listeners.
Until next time, happy investing.